I've now started the recording, and Craig, then if you want to introduce yourself and kick us off.
Perfect. Thanks, Shauna. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here tonight. I know it has been a somewhat of a lengthy road to get here. We're really excited to provide this public meeting to review the draft Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Now, if you've had a chance to interact with it online or even in PDF form, you know that it's got a lot of information. So tonight really is going to be an opportunity for us at a high level to run through what we're considering some key points to share for this public meeting, but also, as Shauna mentioned, provide an opportunity to dialogue with any questions that you may have. Sean Wagner and I, with Parks and Recreation, have been really kind of co-leading this effort, and we've got a much larger Tempe team, but also we're thankful for a great lead consultant, Planet Communities. We got Leslie Dornfeld, who has joined us, will help answer some questions here at the end, but it's been a great team effort really to get us here, especially as we talk through this new plan format. It's taken a significant amount of effort, not just with the Planet team, but also with our GIS team internally to work through and to present it even to have it as a draft form in which we'll present it here tonight. So it's been a great team effort. Appreciate the time that you have taken to join us here today. I'm going to run us through just a brief introduction on what we're going to be covering here tonight. We plan on taking the first half hour or so to go through this presentation, but also run through a dry run of the story map, just to more as a tutorial of this is how you run through it than anything else. I'm going to take my video off here for a sec, and we'll transition over to the presentation. All right, so tonight, we're going to just review briefly what a Parks and Recreation Master Plan is. As a reminder, I'm going to go through, as I mentioned, the story map format, just very briefly. We're going to talk within kind of a PowerPoint presentation format, how you navigate the plan. It's not going to be exhaustive, but I hope to really back it up with an additional run through later on. The plan is and has been founded on some key guiding principles, 4 terms that we're really utilizing as kind of our grounding source to keep going back over the next 10 years. We're going to review some just general high level, a few strategies related to those guiding principles. We have many of them. We have just picked a few out just to identify. It doesn't mean that the ones that we haven't identified aren't helpful. We'll talk through key next steps and timeline. I will, as I mentioned, I'll pull us out of this PDF presentation and run us through a story map dry run, and then we'll open it up for some questions and comments towards the end. But again, thanks for taking the time. We'll run through the presentation with a quick overview of what a Parks and Recreation Master Plan is. So from a Parks and Recreation standpoint, understanding that we're a key component to the quality of life within Tempe, we see this as our comprehensive planning effort. It is not focused on a specific place and developing a place or a program in a place, but it really focuses on the entire system. Therefore, it's comprehensive. It is meant to be a 10-year planning document and effort. Not that it takes 10 years, but it is supposed to cover the next 10 years. We unfortunately have not been through this planning effort since 2001. So we recognize that we're about 10 years behind the curve where we should be. But now is a great time understanding that so much has changed within Tempe over the past 10 years, past 20 years for that matter. And it's comprehensive in the sense that it covers the parks and open space areas and preserves that we manage, the brick and mortar facilities that we also have staff that work in and out of, that we offer programs. And then also it covers the programming, the events, those services that we provide as a division to our community and to folks who come into Tempe. So it covers the parks, facilities, and programming. It is a very comprehensive planning effort. It looks at what we currently are doing, what we have done, and it has an evaluation mechanism built in and makes some key recommendations that really help deliver not just services, but the future for Tempe Parks and Recreation, both in services and in our physical spaces. It provides an opportunity for guidance and policy direction. This is a plan that we hope that Mayor and Council before the end of the fiscal year will actually adopt formally. And then finally, understanding that we do want to look forward. And in looking forward, we want to make sure that we look at some short-term strategies to make sure that we're achieving that long-term success. So this is a 10-year planning effort, but we also want to look at the next 20, 30 years, but focus on the 10 with the next 30 years in mind. And that's going to be a key component to this planning effort. And if you've had a chance to view the story map draft that is online, you'll see that the planning document itself is a little bit different than what you may be used to from the 2001 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. That was a 300-page document that you could sort through as a PDF online. You could print out, put in a 3-ring binder. But we believe that the story map is a great opportunity, and we're thankful that Leslie and her team, coupled with our GIS team, have really put together what we think is an online, interactive, and explorable guide, something that really is going to tell a story in multiple formats, whether it's going to be through maps, abbreviated text, media, some charts, some pictures. And we hope that because of that, we hope that it's not only going to provide a better experience for staff, as we refer to it, but also that it's going to help provide a better experience to the public as well. Something that we hope that residents and visitors at Tempe will be something that you actually will take the time to refer to over the next 10 years. And while it is visually attractive in a user-friendly format, we want to make sure that we also provide a print option for anybody who would like to see it in paper form, recognizing that's not our main goal and objective, but we do want to provide that as an opportunity. And as it is in draft form, it's in draft form in a story map format, but it also is in draft form in print through PDF as well, if you'd like to get it on there. So I'm going to pause on this frame for a second, and we will run through it a bit more in detail when I go through the dry run. But as you'll see, and kind of an older screenshot here in the middle of the plan, we actually have identified 9 different tiles, which are really the sections or the chapters within the planning document. So there are 9 different chapters. This is what is called the collection. The top 3, 1, 2, and 3, really are meant to be introductory information, how to use the plan, a table of contents with some recognition, and then also an introduction to the plan and the planning process. That second tier, from sections 4 through 6, are really meant to be key background information on the master planning process, what's gotten us here, but also about Tempe in 2020. That was the main year of this planning effort, as well as what the Parks and Recreation system looks like today, which is really tied to that 2001 plan. And then finally, those bottom 3 tiles from sections 7 and 9 are what we would consider really the meat and potatoes of this planning effort as we look towards the future for the system within Parks and Recreation. What are some of those principles and strategies that we hope to achieve to really bring about the Parks and Recreation system in the future? And then finally, what are some of the cost implications and opportunities that we have for implementation of the plan, especially as it relates to any physical infrastructure improvements that we would make over the next 10, 20, 30 years as well. So that is a brief overview of those 9 different sections or chapters within the plan. And again, referring in a bit kind of a tighter view on the collection overview, the plan is a collection of chapters, as we've seen. If you're looking at, and we'll run through it in a bit more of an online format through the story map itself, but you are welcome at this point to run through the plan in order, or you can pick any of the sections and actually select them, like section 6. If you want to select chapter 6, you just click on that chapter 6, and it'll bring you to chapter 6, where you'll have an opportunity to run through our Parks and Recreation system of today in 2020. And you'll have an opportunity from here to move through the plan, either back through the plan by scrolling and hitting that top button, or you can actually scroll through this section here that'll take you further down into the plan, where you'll still have that upper level legend, for lack of a better term, that provides opportunities. So you can select a grid to return the collection of chapters. You can then move within a chapter itself by selecting one of the subtopics within the larger chapter. And then you can also, when you get to an area of the chapter that provides kind of that rightward arrow, you can provide more, you can look at more information just by scrolling to the right as well. And I'll go through this in a bit more detail with other sections of the plan, specifically as it relates to some of the maps, which are a bit more difficult to show with a screenshot than they are to actually interact with them in real time. So when it comes to navigating maps, this is a screenshot taken out of how to use this plan and how to navigate the plan. There are 3 key things that I think are worth us mentioning from the beginning on this slide here. At the bottom left, as identified in the text on the left of this slide, is a key. It doesn't automatically generate. You're going to have to select it, but it does provide background information of what you're looking at within the map itself, especially when the map is color-coded. Now, within the map itself, if you select one of the areas within the map, one of the green spaces identified here is a park itself. Daly Park has been identified. It will actually bring about more information related to the park or whatever section that that map actually refers to. It could be related to education within the city, potentially on disabilities, or access to vehicles. So wherever the map is, by selecting a specific area on the map, you're either going to select a site or you're going to select a census tract that is going to provide more information about that area and as that map is related to where you're at in the plan. And then finally, on the bottom right-hand side, not very visible, but the pink arrow kind of points towards it. You have an opportunity, if you want to scroll in and maximize and make the map larger, you can hit the plus button. The opposite is true if you hit the minus button. And then there is a house icon that really helps you bring it back to the original size and extent of the map within that screen. There is also this map here has been presented rather than in story map with a text next to it in full screen view, which there is an identifier at the top right hand side of the screen. So that's just quickly how to navigate the map. I will provide more information as we get through this portion of the dry run. So the other key piece, we recognize, and I mentioned it earlier, that the plan itself has four kind of guiding principles that we've called them. These are key terms from a planning efforts for Parks and Recreation that have a much broader opportunity and impact to the Parks and Recreation field than just this plan, but also within the city itself. And therefore, they are founded on those City of Tempe Council strategic priorities identified on the left. We've identified four key guiding principles in alphabetical order, no particular order except for alphabetical here. And we're going to spend the next few slides really drilling into some examples of what each of these guiding principles mean from a high level. So inclusion is a key piece to the Parks and Recreation system, we believe, for the next 10 years. How can we be welcoming and make sure that there's access to everybody within our community through Parks and Recreation? We believe that resilience is key within Parks and Recreation as well, as we look at what can Parks and Recreation do to help our community thrive in the midst of uncertainty, whether it's through social events, health events, or potentially even environmental events. Strategic, we recognize that there is an opportunity for us to make sure that we always have an eye for continual improvement. And then finally, sustainability, really balancing out our responsibility socially, economically, and environmentally within Parks and Recreation. And as you'll notice, as I've just gone through even those four high-level descriptors, that there is a lot of crossover, between sustainability and resilience. Environmentally, absolutely. Strategic and sustainability with the economics, or inclusion and sustainability with the social responsibility that we have here. So we're going to keep coming back to these guiding principles because section number 8, chapter 8, plan principles and strategies really are founded upon these four key guiding principles. And it's really been in concert with what we're calling our technical advisory committee that has been working with our project team and Leslie and her team. This technical advisory committee is made up of key staff from multiple different departments within the city that make sure that we are being consistent with other planning efforts and the efforts of the city, and that we're not operating in a bubble. And this technical advisory committee has been instrumental in helping us really craft key strategies tied to these guiding principles and even identifying what they mean. So we're now just going to run one by one alphabetically through each of the guiding principles, not give exhaustive information, but just give a quick look at what each of these means. So the first principle is inclusion. We're going to identify some strategies under the guiding principle of inclusion. And on this slide, it's not laid out this way within the plan specifically, but the blue box that we'll see for this slide and the next three really defines what inclusion means and the context from which we're using it. So inclusion for us within this plan is to provide community access and opportunity regardless of color, gender orientation, age, income, or ability. And within the plan that we've not identified here are what this principle actually means within Parks and Recreation. So for example, inclusion within Parks and Recreation means that the Parks and Recreation system and facilities is connected to and integrated into the community, that we meet the recreation needs of a diverse community, that we're welcoming, and that Parks and Recreation systems are designed for all, that our system and services are equitably distributed throughout the community, that they're accessible, compliant, ADA compliant, that is, and affordable, and finally, that they connect the community to multiple modes of transportation so that folks can actually transport and move throughout the city. So that is something that we've not highlighted on this slide or any future slides, but is a key component to how we have outlined the specific plan principles and strategies. So the definition top left, and then some key strategies identified with inclusion here. We're framing all of our strategies within things that we're going to continue to do, things that are what we're calling near-term recommendations, the first 5 years, and then there's midterm recommendations. What are we hoping to accomplish and implement from years 6 through 10? So we're going to continue within the inclusion guiding principle to implement the city's ADA transition plan. We're doing this currently. We will continue to do this. If you've been a part of any of our renovation projects, whether it's a restroom renovation, ramada renovation, playground renovation, you have seen improvements as it relates to accessibility. And we want to make sure that we're implementing what has been identified as some areas that we need to improve within ADA needs. We want to design and construct a fully accessible and inclusive play area. This is something that we believe that we can take inclusive play to the next level through this guiding principle. And again, these aren't meant to be more important than others, but we do have a couple dozen of strategies related to inclusion, working with a social justice entity to support community engagement. How can we do what we're doing now in a better, more robust way that is more inclusive to the community and really looks towards equity? And then there's a few things that we're highlighting here. What we would like to implement directly after this planning effort is to conduct some equity studies related to park distribution and access. And it's not just from the higher scale of specific parks, but also within those amenities within parks themselves, where we're recommending additional dog parks, some more pickleball courts. Where should those go? We believe that an equity study should really help determine that within the city. And the same thing based on equity for a service philosophy related to equitable recreation programming and facilities within the city. And then finally, we don't want to just have these studies. We want to make sure that we're implementing it so that we've identified language that really helps us focus on what we can do to incorporate in a very timely manner the results of those equitable studies. Second, we're going to focus on resilience. A definition in the top left that parks and recreation systems and services are key to helping our community thrive despite what I mentioned previously, environmental, societal, and health events. Some key strategies related to that. We know that implementing an urban forest master plan is going to be a key way that we reduce the urban heat island effect by increasing shade. And we're doing that by planting more trees. These are things that we want to continue to do, but also by managing the trees that we have in a better way. How do we use parks and recreation sites? How do we continue to use parks and recreation sites as key gathering areas, especially during times of when there's needs from a resilience standpoint or emergency management? We have found that over the course of the past year with COVID, with heat relief and those sorts of things. How can we design and retrofit parks so that we're better able to be resilient against climate change? What partnership opportunities are there for us to partner with somebody in implementing community gardens to provide a positive influence on food islands? We've recently opened up our third community garden within Tempe over at Earhart Park in our partnership with Friendship Village. Next to last, what are some ways that we can implement and adopt cool materials for use within utilizing heat and health data into park design? What ways can we be more resilient there? And then finally, what opportunities do we have for partnerships to make sure that we're providing programming that is something that is really helping our community from a resilience standpoint? Third strategy and guiding principle is strategic. We want to make sure that we're focusing on continual improvement. Just some of the key strategies related to that. What can we do to continue to work together as a division within other departments within the city to address the impacts of homelessness within parks and preserves? What can we do We need to make sure that we continue to implement recently completed planning efforts. Again, we've had some great plans that have been recently completed within Rio Salado, the Kiwanis Park Management Plan and the Aquatics Needs Assessment. Let's continue to utilize those. We need to make sure those are folded within this one. Adequate levels of staffing and resources so that we're managing our facilities and our physical spaces. What can we do to make sure we're light and unlit fields to extend use time? You know, this is relatively a low cost to add more recreational value. From an outreach perspective, focus groups and surveys and user evaluations, how can we provide better services and experiences through that? And then finally, offering online facility reservations for field courts and classrooms as well moving forward. In what ways can we implement those changes? And then finally, sustainability, where we're really looking at our parks and recreation system and services to make sure, as I mentioned previously, we're looking at social, environmental, and economic impacts. How can we enrich and sustain the community? How can we nurture the environment? How can we contribute to the economy? And what I love about the definition of sustainability here is it's not just surviving, but it's thriving. It's the opportunity for us to be restorative within the community. And we believe that Parks and Recreation has a goal of just not doing harm, but also of doing the opposite, of providing those benefits and providing increased value to the community and quality of life. So we need to continue reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We've done this through upgrading high pressure sodium lights within parks over to LED for area lighting. Again, implementing the city's urban forest master plan through the addition of trees with an emphasis on equity. Where is it needed most? Implementing and updating the city's integrated pest management program really focuses on our desire and our want to reduce the use of synthetic pesticides within our parks and recreation system. And then tied to that, how can we then be more proactive from an organic land management perspective by utilizing compost and organic fertilizers? Tied to not maintenance, but site improvements. There's a sites certification very similar to the LEED buildings, but these are for landscape architect related projects. What can we do? And working with our sustainability office to potentially pilot some site projects, some site certification projects. And then again, getting into the weeds, what are opportunities for us to work on supporting pollinators and native species, this potentially through food forests and native pollinator gardens. So again, these are just some key ways that we have identified some strategies moving forward. Our key next steps of where we're at now in March. March and April really are a couple busy months for us as a team. We have the public review through the end of this month that is available online. You can get in and run through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the draft form, an open comment period. Would love to not just get questions and comments here tonight, but also would love those through the forum. March and April, we have multiple boards and commissions. I think we're up to 12 that we'll be presenting at. We had the Sustainability Commission last night, but we're headed towards a City Council work study session in April. We then will take the information from public input, from boards and commissions and the City Council. We'll work with the Planet team and finalize the plan in May in efforts and hopes of really getting that final plan adoption towards mayor and council before the end of the fiscal year in June is our hope, so that we know we've got a busy couple months ahead of us, but we believe that that is something that we would like to do so that we can really get on to the business of implementing this planning effort. So I'm going to back out of this slide here, and I'm going to run us through the draft plan. All right, Shauna, would you mind confirming that that's come through, that I'm now on Google?
Yes, you are.
All right, perfect, thanks. All right, so we're going to take a few minutes. I know that I shared briefly how to navigate the plan from an actual slideshow. That's not really the most intuitive way to do it. But as I mentioned previously, this is the actual landing page. If you get on currently through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan webpage and select Interactive Story Map, it'll take you to this collection, which is an opportunity for anybody to dive into any section of the plan, whether you want to run through it in order or you want to get down to a very specific section. Now we do have, as I mentioned previously, at the very top, we have introductory information on these first 3 slides. The second 3 sections or tiles really are the background information of where we're at today in the process. And then finally at the bottom, are the plan strategies and potential costs for us to implement the plan moving forward. So there are a couple ways to actually navigate the plan itself. You can navigate, as I mentioned, in individual sections, which will bring you to that and allow you to scroll through. And as I mentioned previously, you can then select on the subsection areas specifically, and it'll bring up that area and it'll load the map. And I'm going to hit the open collection overview that will take us back to the beginning, or you can actually go into the table of contents. And once we go through the recognition area, we'll scroll through. It'll take us through the table of contents, which is very similar to that collection view, except you can then select, click here to read this section. It's very similar to what we have been through, and it'll take you to an area within the plan, like the introductory section. And again, I use this grid, the open collection overview, very frequently to move throughout the plan, so I can go back to the beginning. But you can also move forwards and backwards through the plan itself, through the different sections, one at a time, by selecting the arrows at the very top. And as you'll notice, as you scroll through each of the areas, this top bar stays with you throughout. And then you also have those subsections that are loaded under the pictures that will then actually stay as we're going through this planning effort. So my best friend here is that grid, the collection overview. Once you get into an area, say we want to look at some of the maps, and we pull out into section 5 about our city, we scroll down and let's go into Tempe in the future and look at some of the population growth potentially. Now we're at one of the maps and it is auto loaded. It usually takes a couple minutes. You can keep the verbiage on the side, or you can actually kind of isolate the map by itself. I tend to do both so I can scroll through the plan still if I would like. And as we mentioned previously, you've got on the bottom right, you can scroll in, you can scroll out, you can hit the home, it'll take you back to the original. And then it'll also show the legend in the bottom left. It takes a little bit to find it, but the legend in the bottom left will actually show you what each one of these items actually means. And as we discussed previously, once you get into a map, you can actually select an area within a map. If you select a green area, that'll highlight one of the schools or one of the sites that you've selected. So if we want to look specifically at, say, Kiwanis Park, we select Kiwanis Park, it'll identify it. And depending what the map is intended to provide information about, you'll have more information here, whether it's related to the amenities within Kiwanis Park or something different. And then it's also we've got some census tract information that really identifies some of the growth in specific areas within the city. You can just select on that. If you don't select one of the parks, it'll automatically select one of the census tracts within it. So just a quick view then of how to navigate some of the maps. Again, you can go back with the grid view. As you saw, we've gone through the maps, we've been through some of the text. The master planning process is pretty straightforward. If you're interested in seeing what information is about plans, principles, and strategies, again, you can select that area or you can scroll one by one. And then when you get down, one thing I failed to mention, you can actually print this screen, print the section here, and it can print it to PDF for you. But it has the 4 different guiding principles. If you want to get down to sustainability, for example, gives you the definition: parks and recreation systems and services that enrich and sustain the community, nurture the environment, and contribute to the economy. And then the principle means, and I went through it for inclusion, but I have yet to go through it for sustainability. This is what a sustainable parks and recreation system should look like. We then have items that we will continue to do, near-term strategies, and then finally, what are some midterm recommendations that we have as well. So that is a brief overview of how to run through the plan. Again, you can select each section individually and kind of power through the plan by hitting that right arrow, or you can really dive down into it. If you really want to know what the parks and recreation system of the future could potentially look like with level of service, which has to do with park amenities, this is the place that you want to go. You'll scroll down and scroll through the plan, some great information, some background information that really then helps us land on a table, which is the recommended level of service, which is a modified version of what we had shown back in 2020. You can select a chart and we'll actually isolate it, and then you can close back out. So that really concludes the dry run of running through the plan. Leslie, if there's anything else that I may have missed on kind of running through the plan, please let me know. And I'd be happy to kind of take somebody through it. But I think at this point, it's probably a good time right at the 6:30 mark to take some questions, unless you have anything that you want to add, Leslie.
No, I think the one thing you might want to remind folks of are some of the links to some of the documents, the supporting documents that are also available, that they can just get those, click on those links.
Yeah, if you want to see the aquatic needs assessment, it is identified and embedded within the plan here on the left-hand side. Yep, the Parks Capital Improvement Plan, or if you want to see what information looks like within the Parks and Recreation. It looks like I am going to have trouble sharing that with my screen the way it is, so I'm going to back out of that one. All right, I'll stop there. All to say that there are links embedded within the plan, to Leslie's point, that really provide an opportunity to get more information, specifically as it relates to any background and outreach that we've done, whether it's the focus groups or the survey from 2019. At this point, I will unshare my screen and we'll pop back out.
So Craig, I do have some questions that were put in the chat that I will ask you, but then for anyone else who has other questions, just want to let you know you can also type them in and we'll read them and Craig can respond. Or if you want to raise your hand, if you're on a desktop or laptop, you can hover over your name and you'll see the hand button that you can click on the right-hand side. If you're joining us from your mobile, you can click on the chat bubble and then you'll see the hand there. And then you can ask your question out loud. But I'm just going to first have Craig respond to the ones that we do have written right now. The first question is, how did the plan's recommended levels of service get arrived at?
Yeah, and Leslie, I'll take the first stab at this one, but the key piece, and we had worked through this in mid-2020, and there was some public survey opportunities around that level of service. But we work with Leslie and her team to identify with the Technical Advisory Committee some, what was the technical term on the jurisdictions we used, Leslie? Refresh my memory.
We called them comparable jurisdictions.
Comparable jurisdictions. And we just identified, we recognized that there were no one community that was exactly like Tempe. So we needed to take a survey kind of throughout the country to identify level of service really is a ratio of amenity per 10,000 people. So we surveyed those different jurisdictions. Leslie came back, we discussed that. We made recommendations whether we would keep the level of service the same, recommend that it would be lower or potentially be higher. We took that to the public to see if there was support for what we had. We received some input that had then made some modifications to the level of service. We also received some input from Mayor and Council as well. So it really was that initial background, running it through the public, and then before the public, running it through a technical advisory committee, and then running it through Mayor and Council as well and taking that. Anything you want to add on to that, Leslie?
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to put a little bit more of a spotlight on is that when we took it to the public, that also included the survey that included over 1,800 responses. And so when we compared the city's level of service to the benchmark jurisdictions, and they weren't arbitrarily selected, they were selected, for example, was it a university town? Was it a growing community? Was it land constrained? Did it have water in it? So we really tried to find places that met a lot of the dynamics of Tempe. When we found those communities, and some of them have that, some of them don't, some of them were larger than Tempe, so we could look at Tempe in the future as it grew, when we tried to find communities that were a little bit larger. To do that, we typically use the National Recreation and Parks, I think they call it now Park something. It used to be called ProRageous. But anyway, we used that to help us benchmark. We did investigations of current facilities through those parks plans. And then when we compared the city of Tempe to those benchmark cities, we looked at the survey and what the community said about those amenities. So do we feel we have enough tennis courts? Is our baseball level of, do we have enough baseball fields? And we balanced those comments against the level of service that the city provided. And then we made some decisions about, again, with the Technical Advisory Committee, should we increase the city's level of service beyond what it currently has based on community comment, or should we keep it the same based on community comment? Another part of that discussion is also trends. For example, do you want to invest in a facility that supports an activity that's either on the upswing or on the downswing? So, I'll use a facility that's not in the plan, a maypole, or having maypole dances on the upswing or the downswing. That would be something else we would look at. Does the community feel there are enough maypoles in Tempe? How do other communities provide maypoles? And balancing all of those thoughts together, we arrived at a level of service.
So the next questions also relate to level of service, but I don't think you've quite addressed it. So we'll continue in that conversation. One is asking how the Tempe's plan's recommended level of service compares to those other jurisdictions, and then also just asking, did the city look at usage of specific amenities or facilities? Are some current amenities lightly used or some overused? With the comment, level of service seems to be a measure of amenity population, not necessarily amenity usage.
You want me to do that? Yeah? Okay. I'm sorry, you're on mute, so I can't hear you.
I am. I said yes multiple times, and I'm sorry.
Okay, so the first one is, how did we compare to other jurisdictions? In some areas, we were quite high, actually. If I'm remembering, I think we did really well in ball fields. In dog parks, not so much. So there were some areas that we were quite high with level of service. And then there were other areas that we weren't. And so those were areas that adjustments were made. While the usage component of level of service was really teased out through the survey. So one would assume that if folks were using, again, I'll use maypoles as an example, if there was a lot of people using maypoles, even if we had a high level of service for maypoles, and people told us we still don't have enough maypoles, we either kept that high level of service or we increased it even more, depending on the interest and the popularity of that particular item. So for example, we did not, if I remember correctly, increase the level of frisbee golf courses in the city. But again, there weren't a lot of people also telling us that they were unhappy with that. One of the things to consider is that in the survey, we also looked at if people were looking towards private facilities for some of those amenities. And in some cases, people were, and again, that information is in the survey. And I think we may have kept one of those pieces of information in the discussion of how our Parks and Recreation system now and Parks and Recreation system in the future.
Thank you. I'm going to go to a raised hand, then I'll come back to the written questions. Kim, you're now unmuted if you wanted to go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. Well, first of all, I have to say this is an amazingly comprehensive approach, and I appreciate that. My question is about how is education incorporated in this, like historical references to some of the parks and amenities in the parks, native plant information, wildlife information. I mean, you could go into identifying the type of landscaping and vegetation that was used in the parks and why. Do you think that's valuable in this reference or not? Thanks.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for your question. I think it's really going to depend on where it wouldn't be something that we would potentially implement across the board, but I think it's worth being targeted. We had a partnership with water conservation over at the library complex, probably going back 20 years with identifying plants that were kind of low water use based on some of the improvements that were made in the courtyard. I think there are great opportunities to be able to do that. I know that at the Desert Conservation Commission level, thanks for your service on that commission, I think we have an opportunity to highlight that potentially within some of the projects that are more, I guess, developed in some more developed areas, like the more park ramadas that we're talking through currently. I think it has I think we have a great opportunity to do that. I'll need to look through some of the plans, strategies to identify whether we've called that out specifically within here. And if not, that would be a great thing for us to consider if you want to put it down on some of the public comment piece. But I think education is going to be key. I know that we want to be respectful of the historical, the cultural significance, but also I think that we've got a responsibility, especially within preserves, looking at Hayden Butte, some of the older signage that we have there that identifies some of the stuff that you're talking about specifically.
The next question is on restrooms. From the survey, it seems like residents wish parks had more restrooms. Can you speak to the plans to add restrooms to parks? It looks like community parks are required to have them. Are there plans to add bathrooms to community parks like Harrelson, Hanger, Wagner, or Kerbel?
That's a great question, and something that we didn't include within the level of service. We looked at that not necessarily from kind of a primary amenity perspective, but we know that restrooms are something that really add to the recreational enjoyment of folks. You know, you're not necessarily going to come to a park to use a restroom, but once you're there, you definitely want one. So within that, working with Leslie and her team, we looked at community parks as being kind of that level that would allow for restrooms, but not all of them have them, where the regional parks have to have them and neighborhood parks would not. So we are not currently looking at adding more restrooms. We would be happy within some of those equity studies to look at where we need to place amenities like restrooms to be included, especially as support to other recreational amenities that we add. We believe that they're going to be valuable, but we also want to be very mindful of location and just specific conversations with neighborhoods if we're going to approach adding restrooms in. So I could see us adding more restrooms potentially in the future. We haven't specifically have any plans to do so, but I think that's a great follow-up conversation that we'll need to have as part of the equity study. So great question.
So right now, I'm not seeing any other questions. If anyone wants to ask any, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat or Q&A. Otherwise, while we're waiting, I did put in the chat the link to the forum where you can comment online, as well as a direct link to the story map Craig was walking you through. So nothing else is coming through, Craig, if you wanted to add any final words or.
Oh, we just had a
one
question.
just came through. Yep. It takes me saying that. Okay. Am I reading that to say, sorry, I have to close the other one. Question regarding, no, I can unmute you. Yes, David, I'll come up to the, hold on, attendees. Okay, David, you're unmuted. Thank you.
Okay. I've got a question about, I guess, new amenities. So we have a list of level of service of amenities that we currently have. And I guess I don't recall from surveys that you've had in terms of the possibility of adding different new amenities. I'm wondering how that process works or how you choose what kind of new amenities might get added to the park system. new types of amenities, that is.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. I appreciate you taking the time to ask that one because I think from an experiential standpoint, probably the way that we're addressing this within Rio Salado specifically, we have an adopted master plan for Rio Salado that looks at the entire 135 acre footprint in and around the Tempe Town Lake. And we know that there's an opportunity for us to add new recreational amenities there, even some that are kind of outside of what we currently have within the system. So within that, we're going to embark on a conceptual planning effort here. I would anticipate over the course of later this calendar year, and that we will explore through a design consultant what are some of those potentials, whether it's like a pump track, something else that is like rock wall related, something that is something we currently have within a playground, for instance, but maybe taken to a different level and different degree. Typically, we come across things that we see that other cities have had. We take resident input. We have been surveying residents within specific neighborhoods as part of targeted outreach for playground renovation projects and ramadas, what additional amenities they would like to see, which has a list, but also has an open-ended, would you like to see other additional things as well? I think that we're always open as staff to considering what is new. We just need to make sure that we have the opportunity to actually add it to an area. And I think that our regional parks are typically the ones that provide the best opportunity to do so because if it can be done on a scale that seems to be more appropriate to a larger space and has those support amenities with it. So if you've got some, please add, let us know when you come across them. You think they're great ideas. You're not bothering us by sending an email saying, hey, this is really nice. I was in this city and they had this. I think whether it's something that we implement right away or just consider and figure out the right time, those would be things that Sean, myself, and the team would be happy to take into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now not seeing any others.
All right. I can wrap us up then, Shauna, if that works for you.
Yes, thanks.
All right. So thanks everybody for taking the time to run through the presentation tonight. It is our opportunity, I think, to say there's been so much work that has been done. I know that it is really tough to narrow it down into kind of a 30-minute presentation and a quick run through of the plan. We know that over the course of this month, hopefully it gives everybody the opportunity to run through the draft plan and get familiar with it. Please let us know if you have questions. We really do want to know what's going to make the experience better within not just Parks and Recreation, but also Navigate the story map. So we want to hear about your experience utilizing this new format. And then we really would love to hear if you have some if we've missed any strategies, for instance, we would love to hear that. And then that key question that we're asking for the public input is, how do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10 about the plan as it currently sits? And then what would move you to a 10? We'd love to hear some suggestions, some creative solutions on ways that we can make some improvements. But, on behalf of really our larger team, I appreciate the opportunity, I appreciate the engagement, I appreciate those who have taken the time previously to engage in this planning effort, and those that will continue to be part of our team moving forward. So, Leslie, anything that you would like to add before we close it?
No, just to echo all your thanks.
Great. All right. So on behalf of our bigger Tempe team, with Sean, myself, Leslie, and the partnership that we've had through this planning effort, I appreciate everybody making it tonight. Shauna, thanks for putting this together, and appreciate the opportunity. Would be happy to chat if there's additional questions. Feel free to reach out.